They say diamonds are forever. But I've learned, through experience, that nothing lasts longer than loneliness. My name is Amalia Cooper. I'm 68 years old, and I spend most of my days in a room that feels far too big, lit by glass displays, reflecting the shine of the jewelry that bears my name. Each piece, rings, necklaces, tiaras, earrings, was created with the same care a mother has when wrapping her child in a blanket. But the love I poured into every creation was the same love that, in the end, left me alone. People look at me and see a powerful woman, a successful business owner, the head of an empire, and maybe, on paper, that's true. But inside, there are days when the hum of factory machines is the only company I have left. Every morning, when the glass doors open, I hear the greetings. "Good morning, Mrs. Cooper. You look lovely today. The new collection is stunning." They treat me like a queen. But their respect has never filled the emptiness of a heart that grew old without being truly heard. I go up to the president's office, put on my pearl necklace, the same one I designed the year my husband left me, and sit before a massive desk that has room for all my awards, but not for a real conversation. Building all of this came at a price, and I don't mean money. I worked through fevers, signed contracts with tears in my eyes, sold what was left of my health to buy my son's future. When Harry was born, I swore he'd never endured what I did, that he'd have everything: education, travel, comfort, respect, and I kept that promise. But no one told me that sometimes, the more you give, the less you're valued. Before I continue, I want to ask you to subscribe to this channel. That way, more stories like mine can be told. Let's keep going. Harry was always different. A sweet boy, but scattered. A teenager dazzled by appearances, not substance. A man who grew used to receiving, never to building. When his father left, tired of living in the shadow of a successful woman, Harry was 10. That day, I vowed he'd never go without. And I kept that vow with an almost obsessive devotion. But the kind of love that protects too much eventually becomes a cage, and the child who never faces the cold of the world starts believing the sun will shine forever. Sometimes, while reviewing reports and approving budgets, I catch myself staring out the glass window, remembering the girl I once was, the one who started out selling costume jewelry at street fairs, the one who slept on the studio floor, afraid of losing her spot the next morning, the one who cried in secret because she couldn't afford her son's school, yet smiled at him the next day, saying everything would be okay. That woman still lives inside me. But now she wears high heels and tailored suits, and she's learned how to cry without smudging her makeup. That day, December 24th, the air felt different. Christmas has always been symbolic for me, the only holiday where the sparkle of the showcases matched the glow of my memories. But that year, even the air felt heavy. I was signing a few contracts when Ryan, my production manager of over 20 years, knocked on the door. He held a folder in his hands and a worried look on his face. "Mrs. Cooper, I'm sorry to interrupt," he said hesitantly. "Go ahead, Ryan. It's about the design department." Harry. He approved some changes without going through quality control. "Changes?" I asked, looking up. "To which models?" "The Audrey collection. The one with the imported emeralds." My heart clenched. The Audrey collection was my crown jewel, the most expensive, most ambitious, and most personal project we had ever created. "He did it on his own?" "Yes, ma'am. And he already sent it to production." I went silent for a few seconds. A chill ran down my spine. Harry had always had good ideas but never discipline. And worst of all, he couldn't stand being corrected. "Thank you, Ryan. I'll take care of it." He nodded respectfully and left, carrying with him a trace of worry that lingered in the air long after he was gone. I looked at the desk. On it sat a framed photo of Harry at 5 years old, his hands covered in paint, his smile wide enough to hold the whole world. So many times, I wanted to pick up the phone and treat him like an employee, not a son, but I always gave up in the end. A mother's heart has an incurable weakness. It always believes that with one more gesture, one more forgiveness, one more chance, everything can get better. I spent the whole morning pretending everything was under control. But inside me, the despair was old, layered, familiar. A part of me already knew the empire I had built with so much love was turning into the stage for my own downfall. That afternoon, I went down to the workshop, the same place where it had all begun. The scent of hot metal and polished stones always brought memories flooding back. As I watched an apprentice shaping a sapphire, a lump rose in my throat. I saw the past flash before me. Me, still young, handing out flyers in the rain. Me, holding a baby in one arm while signing overdue checks. Me, hiding the divorce papers behind company reports. Me, swearing that if I ever had to choose between love and success, I'd keep them both, and ending up with only success. Suddenly, I heard someone call my name. It was my assistant, Lydia, always kind. "Mrs. Cooper, the driver is ready for you." "Thank you, Lydia, tell him to go home. I'll drive today." She looked surprised. It had been years since I last drove, but didn't question it. I just wanted to feel like I still controlled something. When the building finally emptied, I stayed alone in the office. The lights glimmered on the glass displays, and for a moment, I felt surrounded by gold but drowning in shadow. I picked up one of the new collections, pieces a diamond necklace shaped like teardrops, and fastened it around my neck. I looked at my reflection and whispered, "Beautiful, isn't it, Amalia? A necklace made of tears, the perfect portrait of your life." I locked the safe, turned off the computer, and picked up the small gift box I would take that evening. A delicate package wrapped in a golden ribbon. Inside was an exclusive piece of jewelry designed especially for the daughter-in-law, who could barely look me in the eye. Still, I believed that the right gesture could mend a wrong heart. On the drive home, the radio played Christmas songs, lights sparkled along the streets, families laughed on the sidewalks, and I felt like a stranger in a world celebrating something I had long lost. At home, the tree shone flawlessly decorated by professionals, smelling of synthetic pine and false memories. I picked up my phone and read the message my son had sent that morning. "Mom, don't be late. Everyone's going to be here. Everyone, except me, maybe." I put on a red coat, pinned up my hair, and looked at myself in the mirror. There were new wrinkles around my eyes. But what hurt most wasn't time, it was the feeling that I'd grown old, alone, holding together a family that didn't want to be saved. I grabbed the gift box, and before leaving, I looked once more at Harry's picture on the wall. In that photo, he still looked like my little boy. "Tonight will be different," I murmured to the emptiness. "Tonight he'll look at me with love again." But the emptiness said nothing back. As my car moved through the glittering streets, I thought about everything Christmas used to mean to me: new beginnings, faith, forgiveness, and now, maybe, goodbye. My heart tightened, as if it already sensed what was coming, but I kept driving anyway. Because deep down, every mother believes that love can fix what time has broken, and I still believed. Christmas has always had its own sound for me. The clinking of silverware, the smell of roasted meat in the air, the laughter of people you love. But that night, it all began with the dry sound of wrapping paper being cut. I was sitting on the floor of my living room, surrounded by boxers and golden ribbons. Across the carpet, one by one, the jewels from the new Audrey collection sparkled under candlelight. I had designed each piece myself, and now I was wrapping them as if they were charms of love, not symbols of luxury. I chose a sapphire necklace for my daughter, La Celeste. She loved blue, or at least pretended to love it whenever she wanted to please my son. For my grandson, Arthur, I bought a handmade toy car. And for my son, a gold pen engraved with the initials ED, the same pen I had used to sign the company's very first contract 35 years ago. "Why are you even taking this, Amalia?" I murmured to myself. "He doesn't care about any of this." But I finished wrapping it anyway. Because that's what mothers do, they keep trying, even when their hearts already know the outcome. Before leaving, I checked the mirror. Small earrings, a discreet necklace, red lipstick. I didn't want to look fragile or proud, just like a mother who still believed in a family dinner. As the driver adjusted his coat in the front seat, I looked out the window. Houses glowed with colorful lights, people hugged on the sidewalks, and there I was, sitting in a silent black car, feeling like the poorest person among them all. I arrived at Harry's house around 8, a modern townhouse, cold and overly bright, the kind of house that looks like a showroom, beautiful, but soulless. I rang the bell, heard footsteps, laughter, the clinking of glasses, and for a brief moment, my heart filled with hope. Maybe, just maybe, this time he had missed me. The door opened. It was Celeste, elegant, flawless, and wearing that smile that never quite reached her eyes. "Amalia, what a lovely surprise," she said, her voice syrupy sweet. "We thought you weren't coming." We thought, a cold plural. No one there had truly been waiting for me. I stepped inside. The room was full: my son, my daughter-in-law, her mother, 2 brothers-in-law, and a handful of children running around. Everything glittered under the massive Christmas tree surrounded by expensive gifts. The music was too loud, the perfume too strong, the laughter too forced. Harry walked over with a quick smile. "Mom, finally," he said, giving me a rushed kiss on the cheek. "Have a seat, we're about to start." I placed the boxers on the sideboard. "I brought some gifts," I murmured. "Oh, Mom, you didn't have to," he replied, glancing at them like someone looking at an inconvenient favor. Then his mother-in-law, Mrs. Grace, chimed in with that passive-aggressive tone only soap opera mothers-in-law seem to master. "You're always so generous, Mrs. Cooper, but here, we don't worry about luxury, you know. What really matters is love." She laughed, glass of champagne in hand. I felt my face flush. I wanted to fire back something witty, but I held myself. I smiled politely, the kind of smile you wear to keep from falling apart. The table looked like a showroom display, imported porcelain, crystal glasses, silver cutlery, but the seat they left for me was the last one at the end, beside a child. Meanwhile, Mrs. Grace sat in the center, right next to Harry and Celeste. "Let's toast to family," Grace declared, raising her glass. Everyone followed, except me, because I knew what sat around that table wasn't unity, it was display. Throughout dinner, they talked about trips, plans, parties. No one asked me a single question. I just sliced the turkey in silence, trying to hide my trembling hands. At one point, Harry stood up to make a toast. My heart started racing. Maybe he was going to thank me. Maybe this would be the moment he'd finally recognize, in front of everyone, everything I'd done for him. "To this wonderful woman," he began, smiling. My chest tightened. "To Mrs. Grace, who welcomed me like a son and showed me what true motherly love is." Time stopped. Glasses were raised. Applause filled the room. And I just sat there, frozen, my fork suspended in midair. My son had just erased me in front of everyone elegantly, cruelly, and completely. My face burned. The laughter sounded distant, muffled. Inside, something broke. "Harry," I tried to speak, my voice trembling. "That was unnecessary." He laughed nervously, trying to brush it off. "Oh, Mom, don't take everything so seriously. It's Christmas. It's Christmas, but I exist," I replied softly, yet firm. For a second, the table went silent. Then came the jokes. "She's sentimental, huh?" murmured one of the brothers-in-law. "It's the wine," Celeste added, laughing. Their words were invisible darts. Each laugh, another cut. Harry turned to me, exasperated. "Mom, please, don't start. We're fine. Everyone's happy. No need for drama." "Drama?" I asked, tears burning behind my eyes. "I raised you on my own. I fought for you. And now I'm a drama." He stood up, frustrated. "Mom, enough. You always have to make a scene. I've told you 1,000 times you're a great businesswoman, but as a mother..." He hesitated. His eyes searched for his mother-in-law's, who gave him an approving smirk. "As a mother, you've always been a display case. Beautiful on the outside, empty on the inside." It felt like a slap. The sound of the words echoed in my head, repeating, multiplying, beautiful on the outside, empty on the inside. I looked around. No one stood up. No one defended me. Not even my grandson, who just looked on, confused. I wanted to speak, but no sound came out. I tasted the salt of the tears sliding down discreetly. I took my napkin and dabbed my lips, pretending to be composed. Mrs. Grace, satisfied, lifted her glass. "Let's toast to maturity," she said. "Knowing our place, that's what makes Christmas peaceful." The laughter returned. The clatter of cutlery, the chime of glasses, the laughter of others. Everything went on as if nothing had happened. Only I stayed still, staring at my cold plate, trying to understand where I had lost my son. I didn't say goodbye. I waited until everyone was distracted and slipped out the side door. I took only the box of jewelry I had brought as gifts. The sapphire necklace was still inside, never opened. Outside, the wind was freezing. Christmas lights flickered in the windows. Laughter echoed from afar. I got into the car, shut the door, and let the silence swallow me whole. I took the necklace from its box and gripped it tightly. The cold stones trembled in my shaking hands. Beautiful on the outside, empty on the inside. I repeated the words aloud until they lost their meaning, but they didn't. They clung to me like an invisible scar. On the drive home, the streets felt longer. The stoplights took forever. And with every red light, I remembered how often I'd erased my own boundaries in the name of love. When I got home, I didn't turn on the lights. I went straight to the living room, sat on the couch, and let the necklace fall to the floor. The stones struck the tiles with a metallic sound, cold, sharp, like the sound of loneliness, breaking apart but never leaving. I looked toward the mirror on the wall and saw my reflection, pale, tired, eyes red, makeup smudged. Is this what I've become? I asked the glass. A woman who built an empire, but lost her son. The Christmas tree flickered in the background, indifferent to the ache that filled the room. And there, alone for the first time in many years, I let myself cry without shame. I cried for who I was, for who I am, and for who I'll never be again. As the tears fell, a strange certainty took shape in the middle of my despair. Something inside me was changing, something that maybe not even love could stop. I held the jewels in my trembling hands. That night, my son killed me in silence, and what remained of me was the echo of his words. My mother-in-law is my real mother. But what he didn't know is that on that very same night, something else was born in me. A kind of pain that doesn't destroy it, transforms. That night had no end. The clock read 3 a.m. And I was still sitting on the couch, same wrinkled dress, smeared makeup, and a soul in pieces. The fallen necklace on the floor caught the slow flicker of the Christmas lights, a cynical, indifferent glow. I grabbed the remote and turned everything off. Only the sound of my own heartbeat remained, too fast for a woman who no longer knew what to do. My body begged for sleep, but my mind wouldn't stop. Every phrase, every laugh, every glance from that dinner replayed in my head like a nightmare on repeat. Beautiful on the outside, empty on the inside. My mother-in-law is my real mother. Those words weren't just spoken, they were thrown, heavy with contempt, and there wasn't a jewel in the world that could hide them. I stood and walked slowly toward the mirror. The woman staring back at me wasn't the one who ran an empire. She was a widow of her own emotions, a survivor of affection. How did I get here? I whispered. When did love turn into humiliation? I leaned my hands on the dresser and took a deep breath. For a moment, I wanted to blame time, age, destiny. But the mirror wouldn't let me lie. What I'd called love was the very thing that was destroying me, Spilla, in the name of a hope that no longer existed. I sat on the bed and looked around. Photos of Harry covered the room, him in my arms as a baby, in his graduation gown, cutting the ribbon at the new company headquarters. In every picture, the same smile, the smile of someone who always knew I'd never let him fall. And maybe that was my greatest mistake, protecting him so much that he never learned how to stand on his own. I brushed my fingers over the frame and, without realizing it, spoke aloud. You destroyed the part of me I loved most, my son, my faith in you. The room seemed to listen. The clock read 3:45, and suddenly, I understood. Some pains never fade unless we do something about them. That's when I felt a new impulse, almost electric, a courage born from shame. I stood up, walked to the desk, and picked up the phone. On the other end, a sleepy but steady voice answered. It was Joseph Almeda, my lawyer and friend for decades. Mrs. Cooper, is everything all right? He asked, with that familial concern of someone who'd seen me weather too many storms. It took me a few seconds to reply. When I finally spoke, my voice trembled, but it was resolute. Joseph, I want Harry out of the company. What now? He straightened up on the other side. Yes, today. Now. You mean, suspend him temporarily? A leave of absence? No. I took a deep breath. I want him out of everything. His position, his access, the accounts, the cards, everything. Silence. I could hear the rustle of papers, the faint ticking of a clock in his office. Are you sure about this, ma'am? It's a final decision. I've had the whole night to think, Joseph, and a lifetime to postpone it. Enough. He sighed. May I ask why? Because I'm tired of being humiliated. I understand, he said softly. But he's your son, precisely because he's my son. And it's Christmas, Mrs. Cooper. Christmas is over, Joseph. While he talked about procedures, documents, and deadlines, I paced the room, each step feeling like it erased another wound. I told him to contact the finance department and block all corporate cards, to remove Harry's name from the joint accounts and revoke his access to the company's systems. By morning, I wanted nothing left of the power he used as a weapon. Joseph hesitated. This is going to cause quite a scandal internally. Worse than scandal is continuing to be complicit. I wrote down clear instructions on a sheet of paper, my handwriting steady, signed everything without my hand shaking, and for the first time in years, I felt a strange relief like I was finally breathing outside his shadow. When I hung up the phone, I sat on the edge of the bed. The adrenaline faded, leaving only emptiness. My hands were sweaty, my chest tight, and fear whispered that I'd gone too far. But then I pictured his face, the arrogance with which he'd looked at me in front of everyone, and the fear turned into strength. I stood, went to the safe, and pulled out a small wooden box filled with old recording tapes and letters from when his father was still alive. I played one of them. Harry was 8 years old, reading an essay for school. My mom makes jewelry and makes magic. She turns stones into love. I cried, not because of the memory, but because I realized that the boy who wrote those words had died a long time ago, and instead of burying him, I kept trying to resurrect him in a man who only knew how to hurt me. The sky was beginning to lighten when I finally closed my eyes. I didn't sleep. I just rested inside a new certainty. There is no peace without boundaries. At dawn, my phone rang. It was Joseph, already at the office. "Mrs. Cooper, we're taking care of everything. The cards are already blocked, and his company access, also done. But I'll need your signature in person to finalize the removal. I'll be there in an hour." I got up and looked in the mirror. My eyes were swollen, my face drawn. But something had changed. The sadness was still there, but it was now accompanied by a dangerous serenity, the kind of calm that only comes when pain finally turns into decision. I arrived at the company early. The building was nearly empty. The few employees who saw me lowered their heads, as if they sensed that something monumental was about to happen. I went up to the conference room. Joseph was already waiting, a stack of papers before him, his expression grave. "I've prepared the removal order. It just needs your signature. And the internal announcement, by protocol, it goes out tomorrow." "No," I said. "Today, at 9. I want everyone informed before noon." He nodded respectfully and handed me the documents. I read each line carefully, breathing deeply with every paragraph. Reason, mismanagement, and breach of trust. 2 short sentences to summarize decades of love poorly returned. I signed, and when the pen touched the paper, the dry scratch of its tip sounded like the snap of a chain breaking. Joseph watched me in silence. He waited until I finished, then asked softly, "Mrs. Cooper, what will you tell him?" "Nothing. He's bound to find out. I know. And when he finds out, maybe, for the first time, he'll learn what consequence means." After Joseph left, I stayed alone in the room. I took out the small mirror I always carry and looked at myself. The wrinkles, the dark circles, the exhaustion, everything seemed sharper, but also truer. I remembered the sleepless nights, the arguments, the cold stares, all the times I swallowed humiliation just to keep up the facade of a happy family. Every time I heard, "Let it go, Mom. You're overreacting. It's just work." And I realized that what I'd just done wasn't revenge, was survival. I took the sapphire necklace, the one I'd brought the night before, and placed it in the drawer beside other prototypes. I decided it would never be sold. That piece, born of brilliance and pain, would stay with me as a reminder. Some jewels aren't crafted to be shown, but to remember what they cost. Joseph returned later that morning, his expression tense. "All done, Mrs. Cooper," he said. "Accounts blocked, contracts terminated, the letter of dismissal sent. Thank you, Joseph." He drew a deep breath, stood there for a moment, as if choosing his words carefully, then said, "May I ask one last question?" "Of course. Are you sure about this, Mrs. Cooper? There's no turning back this time." I looked out the window. Outside, the sun was breaking through, lighting up the glass reflections of my empire. I thought of everything, the boy in his school uniform, the arrogant man, the hollow gaze from the night before, and I answered, without taking my eyes off the light, "There's been no turning back since the day he called me a useless old woman." Joseph nodded quietly. He closed the folder, gathered the papers, and left. The door clicked shut behind him, a clean, sharp sound. The exact sound of my freedom. Alone, I sat at the table and let my hands rest on the cold surface. Outside, I could hear the city coming back to life. Inside me, something was beginning too small, but alive. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't courage. It was a kind of peace that's born when pain finally finishes the work love couldn't do. And in that silence, I understood. Sometimes, You have to lose a son to save a woman. By the next morning, he still didn't know, but the empire that had always protected him would no longer exist for him. And what came after would change everything. I woke to the sound of messages buzzing on my phone. The clock read 10:30. I opened my eyes slowly, my head still heavy from the night before. My body begged for rest, but my heart was already on guard. The messages were from Harry, short, direct, as always. Mom, we're having lunch at Solar Jardim. It's going to be great. Everyone will be there. Hope you can make it. Not a single please. Not even a good morning. Just an invitation disguised as an order, as if it were a favor I owed him. I closed my eyes and thought about not going. But soon, that old companion returned, the guilt. All mothers who love too much know too well. It's Christmas, Amalia. It'll look like you're sulking, I told myself. So I got up, but I was no longer the same woman from the night before. I showered and dressed simply, a beige outfit, discreet, almost without shine. I opened the jewelry box and hesitated. The sapphire necklace was still there, untouched. I ran my fingers over it, then closed the lid. That sparkle no longer matched me. I sprayed a light perfume, fixed my hair, and looked in the mirror. I looked like someone else, a woman who had suddenly learned to expect nothing anymore. When I stepped outside, the sun was high. The streets were full of smiling people, carrying flowers, balloons, boxes. I sat quietly in the back seat of the car. The driver, sensing my mood, said nothing. Solar Jardim was an expensive restaurant popular among businessmen and politicians, the kind of place that worships the spectacle of status and lives off appearances. The perfect stage for the son I had raised. When I entered, I saw the table set in the center of the room. Long, elegant, filled with crystal glasses and fine china. Celeste and Mrs. Grace sat side by side, laughing loudly, showing off the jewelry I had once designed and sold. My son, at the far end, commanded the scene like an actor confident in his own script. As soon as he saw me, he stood up. Mom, he said with forced excitement. I thought you'd decided not to come. I didn't want to give people more to talk about, I replied dryly. Oh, none of that. Today's a happy day. Please, sit, I obeyed. Sat near the end of the table, silent. The conversation flowed freely, trips, business, jokes, plans. And there I was, invisible, trying to hide the weight still clinging to me from the night before. Every now and then, Celeste glanced in my direction. Half smiles, whispered comments to her mother. Small things, but sharp. I pretended not to notice, though my heart felt every sting. Lunch dragged on into the afternoon. Waiters came and went, bringing bottles of imported wine, fancy desserts, hollow toasts. When the waiter brought the check, Harry pulled out his wallet and said loudly for everyone to hear, "Today's on me." Laughter, applause, pride. After all, the son of the city's most respected businesswoman was paying for the feast. He handed the waiter the company's black card with a triumphant grin. But seconds later, the waiter returned, uneasy. "I'm sorry, sir. The card was declined." The sound of the word declined cut through the air like a blade. The conversations stopped. Eyes met. And for a moment, the silence spoke louder than 1,000 humiliations. Harry laughed nervously. Must be a system error. He grabbed his phone, opened the app, tried again. Another decline, then another, and another. His face began to change, confidence turning to anger. "Mom, what's going on?" he asked through gritted teeth. "I don't know what you're talking about. Don't pretend," he shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "It was you, wasn't it? You blocked everything." All eyes turned to me. My daughter-in-law brought her hand to her mouth. Her mother widened her eyes in feigned shock. The waiter, unsure what to do, quietly stepped back. "Harry, lower your voice. I'm your son," he roared. "And you humiliated me, in front of everyone." "You humiliated yourself," I said, barely above a whisper. But he didn't hear me. He was out of control, shouting nonsense, calling me ungrateful, cruel, unbalanced, and each word was a fresh wound, opened in front of strangers. People at nearby tables started whispering. Some pretended not to notice, others discreetly filmed with their phones. And there I stood, motionless, feeling shame crawl across my skin. Inside, I was screaming. Outside, I stayed calm, that kind of calm that isn't peace, but collapse. Celeste pretended to hold him back, but her eyes gleamed with barely hidden satisfaction. And his mother-in-law, she smiled. A slow, poisonous smile that said, without words, "We finally brought you down." I stood slowly, picked up my purse, and said, with a steady voice, "Excuse me." "Oh, running away," he sneered, as always, but I didn't answer. I walked toward the ladies' room, short, heavy steps, feeling every gaze follow me like knives. Inside the bathroom, the noise of the restaurant became a distant murmur. I locked myself in a stall and rested my forehead against the cold wall. Let the tears fall, silent, as if ashamed of existing. I thought about everything: the dinner, the phone call to my lawyer, the scene from minutes ago, and I asked myself, once again, why? Why had the love I gave become ammunition against me? Suddenly, I heard voices entering the bathroom. 2 women. Muffled laughter. Whispered words. I stopped crying and froze, listening. "I told you, Mom." It was Celeste's voice. It was only a matter of time before he lost everything. "I know, dear Mrs. Grace replied, mockingly. "But I'll admit, I didn't think the old woman would move that fast." "Relax," Celeste chuckled. "This just speeds things up. Now he'll have to act soon. And the case, it's all ready. He'll file the petition as soon as we get the new report. You think she'll go down that easily?" "Of course, old, alone, exhausted. No one's going to believe her. And once he takes over the company, we'll sell everything and disappear." My blood ran cold. I couldn't breathe. Every word was a knife. The plan. They wanted to have me declared incompetent. They wanted to strip me of everything: my company, my name, my dignity. And the worst part, the betrayal came from within my own home. I waited until they left. Their voices faded. The echo of their heels drifted away. I opened the door slowly and looked at myself in the mirror. Red eyes, pale face, a shattered soul. For a few seconds, I just stood there, unable to move. The world was spinning, but inside me, everything had stopped. It wasn't anger, it was disbelief. That hollow realization that the ground beneath you never really existed at all. They want to destroy me, I thought. And the worst part is I gave them everything I had, even the power to hurt me. I gripped the sink tightly. My hands trembled. But within that trembling, something new began to grow, something between pain and clarity. I walked back into the dining room. The table was still full, but the air had changed. Harry sat with his head down, tapping on his phone, probably trying to fix the chaos he'd just discovered. No one said a word as I passed. No one offered to walk me out. I asked the waiter to call the driver. While I waited by the door, I caught their reflection in the lobby mirror, laughing, whispering, continuing their lunch as if I had never existed. As if I were nothing more than an inconvenient detail in their story. The car arrived. I got in, and only then did the weight of what I'd learned truly hit me. The city drifted by outside the window like a silent film. People carrying flowers, couples walking hand in hand, children laughing. And there I was, alone in the back seat, feeling my heart collapse in on itself. The driver asked if I was all right. I answered with just a gesture. There weren't enough words to describe that kind of pain. I closed my eyes and thought of Harry's childhood, the first drawing he made for me. How he used to say he wanted to be Mom's helper forever. And I realized that boy no longer existed. Maybe he never had, maybe he was only a reflection of the love I wanted to see. When I got home, I went straight to the living room. I sat on the couch and stared at the still-lit Christmas tree. The lights blinked indifferently, and the sapphire necklace still lay on the table, cold, silent, ironic. I took a deep breath. For the first time in a long while, I didn't cry. There weren't enough tears left for what I felt. What there was instead was something else: clarity. The kind of clarity that arrives when love dies and truth walks in. A bitter, cruel, but necessary truth. I picked up a pen and a blank sheet of paper. I wrote just one sentence: I will never again be anyone's prize. I folded the paper and placed it inside the jewelry box. And there, in the silence, I understood something I had never seen before. They didn't want my money. They wanted my place, my name, my power, my respect, all that I had built alone. And if they had to erase me to get it, they would, without hesitation. I walked to the window and looked out at the glowing city. People were celebrating Christmas, but my Christmas ended right there, along with what was left of my innocence. That was the moment I understood it wasn't my money they wanted. It was my place, and in that instant, I stopped being the wounded woman and became the woman who fights. The next day, he would come to my door, shouting what remained of his anger. But what he didn't know was that, this time, the one ready to strike back was me. Dawn came before I could sleep. The sky was still gray, the air heavy, and inside me everything felt suspended, as if the world itself were holding its breath, waiting for the next blow. I knew it would come, and it did. Around 9, the sound of the doorbell sliced through the silence of the house. Once, twice, 3 times. Then came the pounding loud, impatient, dripping with anger. "Mom," his voice echoed down the hallway. "Open this door, now." My heart raced, but I didn't move. He kept shouting, louder each time. "I know it was you. You ruined me, Mom. Is that what you wanted? To see me humiliated? To see me crawl?" The words bounced off the walls, and I could hear the neighbors opening their windows. Some whispered, others simply stared. And there he was, my son, the same boy who once fell asleep in my arms, now spewing hatred at me in front of everyone. I held the doorframe and closed my eyes. For a second, I thought about opening it, about asking him to calm down, telling him I loved him. But the sound of his voice was the same as the night before, the same voice that had humiliated me. And I realized that if I opened that door, he would destroy me again, not with fists, but with words. So I took a deep breath and stayed still, completely silent. Outside, I heard the thud of kicks. He struck the door hard, again and again, until he was out of breath. Then came the sound of heavy breathing, and one last shout. "You'll regret this, you ungrateful old woman." Then, silence returned. But it wasn't the same as before. It was the silence of a decision carried through. I waited a few minutes, just to be sure he was gone. Then, I picked up the phone and dialed Joseph, my lawyer. "Mrs. Cooper," he answered, his voice tense. "Are you all right?" "He came here, Harry." "Yes," yelling, disturbing the whole neighborhood. "Are you safe?" "I am. I didn't open the door, but I want to take further action." I paused. My hands trembled slightly, but my voice came out steady. "I want the company to reclaim the car he's using. It's part of the corporate fleet, understood, and I want to change the occupancy terms of the house he lives in. That property is still registered under the company's name, right?" "Yes, it is." "Then, Joseph, make arrangements to repossess it. He and everyone else need to leave." There was a long silence on the line. Everyone, Mrs. Cooper, everyone. The wife, the mother-in-law, anyone living there. "I understand. Do it legally, cleanly, without scandal, but do it." He nodded quietly. "It'll be done. But allow me to ask, are you sure?" "More than ever," I answered. "They used my name to humiliate me. Now they'll learn what it means to carry it without right." When I hung up, I sat on the couch and stared at the floor. My body trembled. It wasn't fear, it was release. As if, after years of holding back a landslide, I had finally let go. Part of me felt guilt. Another part, relief. Guilt, because he was still my son. Relief, because for the first time, I was choosing myself. I closed my eyes and let the memories come. The first day I took him to school, the smell of his hair after a bath, the nights I stayed awake waiting for him to come home from parties. Each memory arrived, mixed with a newer one. The humiliations, the shouts, the coldness, and I realized something I'd never wanted to admit. My love had become sick. I no longer loved the man he'd become. I loved the memory of the boy I'd lost. And that, more than anything, hurt. I thought of all the women I'd known over the years, mothers, wives, sisters, who mistook love for servitude, who believed that enduring humiliation was proof of strength. I had been one of them. For decades I shrank myself to fit into his life, and in the process, I disappeared. Loving is beautiful, but loving without limits is losing yourself. I stood, walked to the living room mirror, and faced my reflection. Deep, dark circles, a worn face, tired eyes, but something new as well. A firmness, the look of someone who's seen the worst and still chooses to stand. "I gave you everything," I said aloud, "but now I will return to myself what's left." That afternoon, Joseph called to confirm the actions. The company would send 2 employees to my son's address to repossess the car. The vehicle was titled to the corporation legally. A notification was enough. He asked if I wanted to come. I said yes. I needed to see it with my own eyes, not for revenge, but to understand if there was anything left in me that forgave him. We went to the condominium, a wealthy neighborhood, tree-lined streets, and automatic gates. I used to visit years ago, bring fruit, desserts, flowers. Now the same road felt like an exile path. The guard opened the gate when he saw my car, without hesitation. Joseph and I got out together. Harry stood on the sidewalk, on the phone, gesturing nervously. When he saw me, he froze. "Mom, what are you doing here?" I didn't answer. The company manager came up behind me with the documents in hand. He explained in a neutral voice, "Mr. Harry, by order of the presidency, we are here to collect the company vehicle." "This is absurd," he shouted. "I'm a director." "You're not anymore," I replied, calm. He looked at me, incredulous. "You can't do this." "I can, and I did." "You'll leave me with nothing." "I didn't leave you with nothing, Harry. You're the one who destroyed everything I gave you." His face twisted between anger and despair. My daughter-in-law appeared at the doorway, arms crossed. Behind her, the mother-in-law, 3 faces, 3 looks, none of them love. Harry threw the car keys to the ground. "Fine, keep everything," he spat, and walked away, slamming the gate behind him. Joseph bent to pick up the keys, handed them to the driver, and looked at me, waiting for instructions. "Remove the car." "And delivered the notice regarding the house," I said, my tone unchanged. My daughter-in-law took a step forward. "You can't throw us out. We have a small child. The house belongs to the company. This is cruelty." "Cruelty," I said, looking her straight in the eyes, "was what you all did to me. Don't worry, don't wish you harm. I just want distance." She fell silent. Her mother tried to intervene, but Joseph politely cut her off. "The legal department will be in touch. All procedures are within the law." And just like that, we turned our backs and left. On the drive home, the sky darkened. A light rain began to fall, and the soft sound of drops against the window brought me a strange sense of peace. Outside, the world went on, indifferent to the silent war taking place inside me. When we reached my gate, I glanced at the rearview mirror. Through the window, I could see the company car being towed away slowly, a symbol of the end. I wanted to cry, but I didn't. I wanted to turn back, but I didn't. I stood by the window, watching the rain trail down the glass. The guilt was still there, stubborn, persistent. But so was the relief. It was a bittersweet feeling. The pain of cutting your own blood mixed with the lightness of finally stopping what was killing you. There's a kind of love we mistake for faith, believing that if we just try hard enough, the other person will change. But love without respect rots, and what rots must, one day, be buried. That day, I realized that mourning a living child is the cruelest kind of grief, because he breathes, walks, speaks, but the person you loved is already gone. The pain is different, but the process is the same, accepting that it's over. Later that afternoon, from my front gate, I saw the company's transport truck pull up at the condominium. From afar, I watched the scene, discreet, quiet, but deeply symbolic. The gate opened, and the employees went inside. Harry stood on the balcony, arms crossed, his face hard. My daughter-in-law cried. Her mother argued with the security guard. A while later, I saw the furniture being carried out, the cars leaving, and the corporate property sign being placed back on the gate. Then the gate closed, for good. I stood there, hands clasped, my heart divided between pride and sorrow, because even when a mother wins, she always loses a little. That day, I thought, I didn't take back a house, I took back myself. But his suffering didn't end there. When he tried to confront me again inside my own company, he learned that public shame is the price of ingratitude. That morning began like so many others, the hum of the factory machines, the smell of heated metal and fresh coffee drifting through the halls. But there was something different in the air, a quiet murmur, a tension I couldn't quite name. I arrived early, as always, signed reports, greeted employees, reviewed the new collection orders, pretending everything was normal. Inside, all I wanted was peace. I didn't know that hell was on its way, and it carried my last name. It was almost noon when I heard the noise. Shouting, rushed footsteps, doors slamming. My secretary burst into the office, pale. "Mrs. Cooper," she stammered. "It's your son." Before I could say anything, he was already there. Harry stormed in like a hurricane-wrinkled suit, red eyes, heavy breath. Behind him, 2 security guards tried to stop him, in vain. "You took everything from me," he shouted. "Everything, Mom." I stood slowly, trying to keep my composure. "Harry, please, lower your voice. Lower my voice. After what you did to me, you expect me to stay calm. This is a workplace." "A workplace," he sneered. "You talk like this company is still yours." "It is, and it always has been." His eyes blazed. Not for long. The commotion drew dozens of eyes. Employees began gathering in the hallway. Some whispered, Others discreetly raised their phones to record. The jewelry empire I had built with so much effort was becoming, right before me, a stage for humiliation. Harry pointed at me, fingers shaking, like a prosecutor before a jury. "You all see this," he yelled to the staff. "This woman you call the Queen of Jewels. She destroyed her own son. Harry, please. She threw me out of my house, took my car, left me with nothing. All I ever did was try to help her, and this is how she repays me." The murmurs grew louder. Some employees lowered their heads, others looked at me with pity. Pity, the one feeling I feared the most. I tried to breathe, but my throat closed up. It was as if every word from him tore another piece of my dignity away. "You want to see me on the ground, don't you?" he spat. "You want to humiliate me completely. Well, congratulations, you did it." And then silence, a dense, suffocating silence, until suddenly, he swept everything off my desk. Papers, pens, a photo frame, the one from when he was a child, crashed to the floor. The glass shattered. The sound of breaking echoed through the floor like a gunshot. I didn't move. His face, distorted by rage, reflected back at me in the shards on the floor. The same boy I once rocked to sleep now looked at me like an enemy. "I gave you the world," I whispered, "and you turned it into mud." He laughed, a hollow, nervous laugh. "The world. You gave me a golden leash, and even so, you still bit the hand that fed you." The words slipped out before I could stop them, but there was nothing left to save. Whatever bound us had already snapped. The security guards tried to approach him. He shoved them back, yelling. The noise carried down to the floor below. Someone called building security. Within minutes, 2 uniformed guards arrived, trying to restrain him. "Don't touch me," he shouted. "This company is mine too." The guards looked at me, waiting for an order. It took me a second, but I gave it. "Call the police." The silence that followed was absolute. Even he stopped shouting, stunned. "You wouldn't do that to me." "I already have, Harry." He froze, staring at me, rage and disbelief colliding behind his eyes. And for the first time, I saw something break inside him. Perhaps pride, perhaps shock. The police arrived quickly. 2 officers entered, calm but firm, as phones flashed and whispers spread like fire. They spoke to him, asked for ID, asked him to step out. "Sir, you'll need to leave, please. She's my mother," he shouted. "She's lost her mind." "Even so, sir, we need you to leave now." Harry looked at me one last time, his eyes full of hate and tears. "You'll regret this." "I already do, son," I said softly. "But what I regret most was giving you everything." He turned his face away and walked out, escorted by the police. The sound of boots and radio chatter echoed down the corridor until it faded, and then silence. Again, silence. But this time, it was a silence full of wreckage. Minutes later, the public relations phone rang. It was the press. Business blogs, gossip sites, social media accounts all wanted to know what was happening at the jewelry empire. Someone had already posted a short video. Famous businesswoman's son escorted out by police after incident at mother's office. I watched the clip seconds later, still shaking. The shaky image showed me motionless and him being led away by officers. The comments poured in. "Such a sad scene. Family and money never mix. Is she even mentally stable?" A mother's pain had become public content. My Shima headline. I turned off my phone. Still no tears, just numbness. But the wound was open, raw, throbbing. Joseph arrived a few minutes later, warned by the staff. He found me sitting in my office, surrounded by papers and shards of glass. He looked at me, hesitated, and simply said, "Let's go, Mrs. Cooper." I nodded, too drained to argue. As I walked down the hall, I felt every gaze follow me. Some were pitying, others quietly respectful, but all carried the same disbelief. No one could grasp what they'd just witnessed. Outside, the sun was shining, but inside me, it was night. In the car, the hum of the engine muffled the noise of my thoughts. I stared out the window, seeing nothing. Joseph, behind the wheel, stayed silent, and I was grateful for it. When the car stopped at a red light, the dam inside me finally broke. The tears came without warning, first one, then all of them. I cried silently, not bothering to hide. The tears were no longer from anger or disappointment. They were the tears of someone who finally understood that love had come to an end. I clutched my purse tightly and whispered to myself, "I gave him everything, everything, and he gave me shame." Joseph heard it but said nothing. He simply reached out, placed a handkerchief on the seat beside me. I took it but didn't wipe my face. The tears needed to fall. As the car moved down the avenue, I saw the billboards of my own brand glowing on the buildings. Amalia Cooper, luxury that lasts for generations, generations. The irony cut deep. The empire I had built to leave as a legacy had now become the stage of my disgrace. I thought of everything that had brought me to this moment, the sleepless nights, stitching designs, the long flights, the endless meetings. All of it for what? To be remembered as the mother who called the police on her son. The knot in my throat tightened, but alongside the pain came something new, clarity, because, for the first time, I could see the whole picture, and in it, love and guilt had blended so completely that I could no longer tell where one ended and the other began. When the car pulled into my driveway, the sun was already setting. Long shadows stretched across the garden, and the wind carried the faint scent of rain. Before getting out, I looked into the rearview mirror, a swollen face, tearful eyes, and I realized that this woman, hurt, yes, but still alive, was the only thing I truly had left. I gave him everything, and he gave me shame. I repeated once more. But this time, my voice didn't tremble, because shame, unlike love, can also teach. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. Outside, the first drops of rain began to fall. Each one felt like a small forgiveness the sky was offering me, and I accepted it. Because maybe rebirth begins exactly like this when you cry, but for the first time, don't regret it. In the days that followed, the scandal spread, but among the wreckage, an unexpected message arrived on my phone. Mom, forgive me, I want to start over. And that was when I learned that remorse can also be a trap. It had been 3 days since I'd left the house, 3 days in which silence had become my only companion. The press had finally calmed down, the videos of the scandal were losing traction online, and the world seemed to move on, as it always does, even when we stay frozen in time. But I hadn't moved on. I was still there in that office, hearing the sound of shattering glass, my son's voice echoing in my mind, and tasting the bitter shame still stuck in my throat. On the 4th day, the phone buzzed. I picked it up without haste, expecting another work notification, a call from my lawyer, or maybe just some automated reminder. But it wasn't any of those. It was him. Harry, Mom, I know things got out of control. I was angry, desperate. I didn't know how to handle it. Forgive me. You're all I have. I read it once, twice, 3 times. The words looked simple, almost innocent, but each one carried the weight of a story I still couldn't bury. I stared at the screen, unsure whether to cry or turn the phone off, but I cried. Because it was the first forgive me I'd heard in years. And for a moment, the mother in me wanted to believe it. I sat down in the armchair, hands trembling over the phone. Outside, the world went on, as usual, cars driving by, children laughing on the street, neighbors carrying grocery bags, and there I was, stuck between 2 abysses, resentment and love. He's sorry. Or is he pretending? Does love change a man? Or does it only change the way he hurts you? Too many questions, too few answers. The phone buzzed again. Mom, I know I messed up, but I was angry. Everyone was pressuring me. I just wanted to be seen. You've always treated me like I wasn't capable, but I want to prove I can be different. The last message stayed, blinking on the screen for a long moment. I want to be different. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. How many times had I whispered that same promise to myself about him? How many times had I vowed to be different, to speak less, expect less, forgive more, and never managed to keep it? The guilt came crashing in, old and heavy, like a tide that drags everything in its path. Flashes of the past flooded back, the boy in his school uniform, the teenager asking for his first car, the man promising he'd run the company with pride. Every time, he promised, and every time, I believed him. I stood and walked to the bedroom, opened the drawer where I kept old photographs. There it was, one of him at about 7, holding a necklace made of colorful beads he'd strung together himself. On the back, written in a child's uneven hand, for Mom, who shines brighter than any jewel. That memory cut me open and healed me at the same time, because in that little boy, there was still innocence, but where had he gone? The phone buzzed again. Mom, can I see you? I promise there won't be any drama. I just want to give you a hug. I want to talk. Each sentence was a hook thrown into my pain, and I, like a tired fish, almost wanted to bite, but something in me had changed. Something colder, sharper. It was the living memory of humiliation. his voice shouting, "Useless old woman," the look in my daughter-in-law's eyes, the smirk of the mother-in-law, the quiet laughter around the table. A hug from the one who destroyed who you were can feel like comfort, but sometimes it's just the noose tightening again. I thought it, but didn't reply. I set the phone aside, turned my face away, and cried, not for him, but for myself. Night fell without me noticing. The living room lights stayed on, the tea on the table went cold, and I remained there, rereading his messages over and over. "Mom, please talk to me. Don't ignore me. I love you." 3 words. Words that had once meant everything, and now meant almost nothing. How many times does love turn into noise? How many times do we mistake the fear of loneliness for the desire to start over? I caught myself whispering to the empty room, if I answer, he comes back. If I don't, he disappears. And either way, I'm the one who pays. I picked up the phone again. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. But before typing, I heard my own voice echo in my head. There's been no way back since the day he called me a useless old woman. I let the phone fall beside me, leaned my head against the couch, and closed my eyes. The whole house seemed to breathe with me. Every sound, the wind, the ticking clock, the crack of wood reminded me that I was still alive, and that love, though wounded, still pulsed inside me, whispering to open the door again. But silence answered for me. It said, wait, watch, trust but verify. And there, between the impulse to forgive and the instinct to protect myself, an idea began to form. I opened my eyes and looked at the framed piece on the wall, one of my first creations, a necklace made of broken, imperfect stones. Its success had come from its flaws. It was the imperfection that made it valuable, and I realized I was like that too, cracked but whole, wounded but alive. I stood up, picked up the phone again, didn't reply to the messages. Instead, I called someone I hadn't spoken to in years, Helena, my old friend, the boutique owner I'd once helped start her business. "Helena, darling, it's Amalia." "Amalia, my God, it's been so long, I need to talk." "Did something happen?" "Yes, and I need to know how far this story goes." When I hung up, my heart was beating faster. Not from fear, but from a tired kind of courage that was still alive. This wasn't revenge. It was necessity. Because love, once it matures, learns to check intentions before opening its arms. I reached for the sapphire necklace still lying on the table. The cold stones reflected my weary face. I ran my fingers over them and murmured, "This time, I won't believe in words. I'll believe in proof." The next morning, I went to meet Helena. I thought I was about to uncover the truth about my son, but what she told me was the beginning of something far worse. The morning was overcast, the kind of sky that seems to sense disaster before it happens. I dressed without hurry, black pants, a plain blouse, a scarf around my neck, no jewelry, maybe out of exhaustion, maybe out of irony. That day, any kind of sparkle felt like an insult. I drove alone. The road to the city center was quiet only, the sound of the engine and my thoughts tripping over each other. Each mile felt like descending deeper into a well I had spent years digging with blind love. When I parked in front of Helena's boutique, my stomach tightened. The silver sign with her name, the scent of expensive perfume, the immaculate window displays, everything was exactly the same. But I wasn't. Helena came toward me the instant she saw me through the glass. She opened her arms, smiling warmly. "Amalia," she exclaimed, emotional. "I thought I'd never see you again." We embraced, and for a second, I felt the rare comfort of being seen without judgment. Helena was one of the few people who knew my whole story, the pain, the sacrifices, the son who had turned into a thorn. "Sit, please," she said, pulling me toward a chair by the window. "Would you like some coffee?" "I would," I said softly. "And thank you for seeing me like this, so suddenly. Please, you know you'll always have a place here." As the smell of coffee filled the air, I looked around. Customers came and went, trying on expensive clothes, chatting about parties and trips, a world that no longer belonged to me. Helena studied me quietly for a moment. Then she set her cup down and said, gently, "You look different, Amalia. Time changes everything. It's not time, it's something in your eyes." "They're tired." "They are," I admitted, "but not from aging, from waking up." She nodded, serious, and I went straight to the point. "Helena, I need to ask you something," I began, hesitant. "And I need you to tell me the truth, even if it hurts." "Of course. A few weeks ago, my daughter-in-law and her mother came here, didn't they?" "Yes, they came several times." "And did you hear anything?" Helena looked at me carefully, then sighed. I did, but I didn't want to get involved. Now, you have to. Are you sure you want to know? I am, I said firmly. I've lived in the dark long enough. She ran her fingers through her hair, took a deep breath, and began. They came in to buy dresses for a reception a few weeks ago. They seemed cheerful, but talked too much. You know when people confuse power with victory? I nodded. That's what it was. They talked about me. I asked, my voice barely there. They did. What did they say? Helena lowered her eyes. They said Harry's situation wasn't good, that the company had cut him off, that you two had fallen out. I already know that. Yes, but then they started whispering. I was at the register, and they didn't realize I could hear them. And what did you hear? Helena hesitated for a long moment. Then, quietly, she said, that Harry had an idea, that he planned to file a lawsuit, to have you declared legally incompetent. Incompetent, I repeated, stunned. Yes, they used the word guardianship. They said they already had a friendly medical report, ready to submit, that, with it, he could legally take control of the company and your assets. The floor disappeared beneath me. For a moment, all sound from the street vanished. All I could hear was the pounding of my own heart. A medical report? I asked. Fake, probably, Helena said quietly. They mentioned the doctor was a friend of a friend, someone the mother-in-law knew. All it would take was a little push to make everything official. Helena looked at me, eyes glistening. Amalia, they spoke as if everything was already arranged. They laughed, said the old woman won't put up a fight, and that when it was all over, you'd be well taken care of, but far from the company, far from society, far from everything. The air turned heavy. My body went cold. My hands began to tremble. Helena reached for my hand, but I pulled Awanat out of rejection, but because her touch made the pain spread deeper. Guardianship, medical report, old woman, words like knives. So that was it, I whispered. That's what it's been all along. Amalia, don't jump to conclusions. I've heard enough. I stood up, walked to the window, and saw my reflection in the glass. Outside, people hurried past, unaware that someone's world was collapsing right there between fabric and perfume. Helena came up behind me. I didn't want to tell you this way, she said softly, but I thought you deserved to know. You did the right thing. You need to protect yourself. I already am, I said, voice steady though it shook inside me. I sat down again. My legs felt weak. Took a sip of my coffee cold, now just to buy time. Helena, I managed to say, do they plan to have me committed? That's what they implied. To a nursing home. They used another phrase, a care institution. Care, I repeated bitterly. There's always a pretty word to hide cruelty. I closed my eyes and let the image form. My son standing before a judge, a forged medical report in his hands, claiming his mother had lost her mind, and me, silent, powerless, watching what was left of myself being stripped away. A tear slid down my face without permission. But it was a different kind of tear, heavier, older, the kind shed by someone who finally understands that love has limits. Helena watched me in silence, unsure what to say. I sat there, motionless, listening to the sounds of the boutique laughter, zippers, credit cards swiping, the sound of normal life, while mine turned to dust. I took a napkin, wiped my eyes, and stood. Helena, thank you. Will you be all right? I will. Do you want me to come with you? No need. What are you going to do? What I should have done a long time ago. She nodded, her face full of understanding and worry. Amalia, be careful. I always have been, I replied. The problem is I used all my caution on the wrong people. The wind outside hit me like a slap. I got into the car slowly, closed the door, and sat for several minutes, just breathing. The sound of traffic felt distant, my mind silent, my body heavy and weightless at once. I looked into the rearview mirror. Red eyes, pale face, but something new stared back, a cold resolve, a decision that didn't need anger to exist. They want to take everything from me, I thought. But they won't take me from myself. I started the engine, and on the drive home, every stoplight felt like a test of control. The anger came in waves, but beneath it lay only disappointment, a disappointment so deep it hurt to breathe. Of all the betrayals a person can endure, the worst is when someone tries to steal your sanity, when they want to silence your voice and make you doubt your own mind. Because once they call you crazy, it's easier to shut you up. And when they silence you, they take the most valuable thing you own, the truth. And that's what they wanted. Not the money, not the jewels, not the property. They wanted to steal me from myself. When I got home, I sank into the armchair. The afternoon light faded slowly, painting the sky a sad shade of gold. I looked at my son's photo on the piano and, for the first time, felt something close to disgust. Not for him, but for what he had become. I picked up the frame, stared into his eyes, the boy I had raised, and whispered, "You wanted to have me committed so you could call me crazy and inherit my reason along with my name." I set the photo back down, face down this time, and in that small gesture I knew the war had begun. The next morning, I called the company's oldest manager. I needed to know how deep the scheme went, and what he told me made whatever love I still had left finally die. That morning, the sun seemed to mock me. It streamed through the window with insolence, lighting up a house where peace no longer lived. The coffee grew cold in its cup, the toast sat untouched, and I, sitting at the table, tried to understand when love had turned into a battlefield. Helena's words still echoed in my head. Each time I replayed them, they grew sharper. Guardianship, fake report, care institution. It was like hearing my own son digging his mother's grave with a smile on his face. But if life had taught me anything, it was this: no woman gets where I did without learning how to fight in silence. And that's exactly what I would do. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in months. Ryan, the company's oldest manager, my right hand for decades. A discreet, loyal man with a sharp memory, the kind who noticed cracks before anyone else did. "Mrs. Cooper." His voice was both surprised and worried. "Yes, Ryan, it's me. It's good to hear from you. Are you all right?" "Not exactly. I need your help, of course. Tell me." "It's about Harry. I want you to look into everything he's done in the company for the past 6 months: transactions, contacts, projects, everything." "Is there a particular reason?" "Many," I replied bitterly. "But for now, just know that trust is gone." He didn't press further. He just answered, with the calm of a man who understands more than words reveal, "Consider it done, Mrs. Cooper. I'll start today." For the next 2 days, my house became a voluntary prison. I barely ate, barely slept. I just waited for the phone to ring. Each sound at the gate made my heart race. It felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, waiting for the final push. On the third morning, the call finally came. It was Ryan. "Mrs. Cooper, I found things you need to see with your own eyes. I'm coming right now." I grabbed my coat and left. The drive to the company felt longer than ever. The same building that once filled me with pride now filled me with dread. Every employee who greeted me seemed to carry an unspoken question. Is it true what they're saying? But I owed no one an answer, not yet. Ryan was waiting for me in the old design room, where all my collections had been born. The air still smelled of metal and perfume, that familiar mix that always reminded me who I was. He greeted me with the same steady respect as always. "Did you bring what you found?" I asked. "Yes, ma'am, but brace yourself." He placed a folder on the table. Inside, printed emails, copies of contracts, bank transfer records, all dated, signed, neatly organized like a dossier. Harry had been in contact with Dean Menezes, the creative director at Audrey Fine Jewelry. "Our main competitor, Menezes?" I asked, startled. "The same one who tried to steal our team years ago." "The very same," Ryan confirmed. He showed me the messages, meeting proposals, confidential file exchanges, discussions about prices. One message made my blood run cold. "The files for the Audrey II collection are almost ready. I can guarantee exclusivity if we close the deal within 48 hours. No one has to know." Harry Cooper, my stomach twisted. "He tried to sell the designs for the new collection?" I asked, my voice trembling. "He did, Mrs. Cooper. For money. For a lot of money and access to the international market." "Did he sell them?" "Not yet. It seems the deal fell through because the files were locked just after his dismissal. But the intent was clear." I sat down slowly. My legs felt heavy, my body hollow. I stared at the papers before me, the trail of betrayal written in black ink in cold letters. For a few seconds, I didn't recognize the name Harry Cooper. It didn't sound like my son's name. It sounded like a stranger's. The tears came silent but stubborn. Each page, each message, was a shattered mirror reflecting the man I had raised. The same boy who once swore to protect me was now trying to destroy me, using the very weapons I had given him: knowledge, power, trust. Ryan stayed quiet, out of respect. He just placed a handkerchief on the table, and that was enough. Do you want me to keep digging, ma'am? He asked after a while. Yes, I answered, still unable to lift my head. Now we go to the end. Every detail, every attempt, every lie. If he tried to sell his soul, I need to know to whom. When Ryan left, I was alone in that room. I looked around the tables, the mannequins, the sketches, the molds. Everything was familiar, yet it all seemed to stare back at me with accusation. You created the enemy. The phrase echoed in my head, though no one had spoken it. I had taught him how to negotiate. I had taught him how to win. I had taught him never to bow. And he had learned, but he used it all against me. Suddenly, everything I'd built with love had become evidence of my blindness, and I realized that the empire I once saw as my greatest legacy was, in truth, the mirror of my guilt. My chest tightened, breathing hurt. I leaned on the counter, eyes closed, forcing myself to inhale slowly, to hold back the sobs. You didn't raise an heir, Amalia, I whispered to myself. You raised an executioner with your name. As the pain tore through me, a memory surfaced the day he came to me as a teenager, asking to work by my side. His eyes were bright as he said, I want to be like you, Mom. I want to learn everything. And I believed him. I turned that wish into his destiny. I opened doors, taught him everything I knew, handed over the family secrets. But I never taught him limits, because I never learned to set them myself. And now, it was too late. I drove home and called Joseph, my lawyer. I told him everything we'd uncovered. He was silent for a few seconds before answering, Mrs. Cooper, this changes everything. I know. If this evidence ever goes public, the case he's building against you won't stand a chance. Even so, I said, I want to keep it quiet. Why? Because I'm still his mother, Joseph, even after everything, especially after. What will you do? I'll fight, but not to destroy. To do what, then? To survive what he tried to do to me. On the other end of the line, he sighed a sound full of respect and sorrow. Later, alone, I walked to the studio in the back of the house. I opened the drawers and spread old sketches across the table. There, surrounded by the creations of a lifetime, I began to grasp the full scale of the loss. It wasn't just my son's betrayal. It was the symbolic theft of everything that defined me. He tried to take not only my name but my mind, my craft, my very essence. For a moment, rage took over. Then, clarity arrived. Rage is the fuel of the weak. Strategy is the shield of the strong. I reached for a new notebook and wrote on the first page, if he used what I taught him to destroy, I will use what I learned from pain to win. I closed the notebook, breathed deep, and for the first time in months my heart beat without panic, steady, purposeful. I went to the window. The moon rose pale and calm through the clouds, a silent witness to another sleepless night. But there was something different in the air, a new energy, dense and almost alive. I picked up the sapphire necklace that lay on the table, the same one I'd brought to the Christmas dinner. The cold stone in my palm somehow felt warm, as if it carried a promise. You taught me the worst of love, my son, I murmured. Now I'll teach you what justice is. Days later, the summons arrived. Harry had carried out his plan. The guardianship petition was officially filed, and soon the whole country would know who Amalia Cooper was, the mother her own son had tried to declare insane. The phone rang early that morning. I was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table, surrounded by empty cups and shattered thoughts. When I answered, Joseph's voice came through steady but hesitant, the kind of tone that clears the path for news that wounds. Mrs. Cooper, tell me, Joseph, the summons has arrived. The air froze. The ticking clock on the wall grew unbearably loud. For a moment, I thought he must be mistaken. But his silence confirmed what I already knew. Harry filed the petition. What kind of petition? I asked, though my body already knew the answer. Judicial guardianship. He's claiming you're mentally unfit. I closed my eyes. For 1 second, the ground, my body, even my name all vanished. And then, like lightning, the anger came cold, sharp, unlike anything before. So, it was true. A few hours later, I was in Joseph's office. The folder lay on his desk, heavy sealed, stamped. He opened it carefully, the way one handles an explosive. Read with me, Mrs. Cooper. I put on my glasses. The letters blurred and swam on the page, but I forced myself to read. Every line was a blade. The founder of the family enterprise exhibits signs of cognitive decline, confusion, and erratic behavior inconsistent with corporate leadership. It is requested that she be declared legally incapacitated so that her son, as rightful heir, may temporarily assume management of assets and ensure continuity of the estate. Attachments, psychiatric report, testimonies from relatives and former employees. I was speechless. The words, incapacitated and declined, pulsed on the paper live mocking. The sterile handwriting of my son's lawyer looked like a death sentence. Testimonies from relatives, I asked in disbelief. The daughter-in-law, the mother-in-law, and 2 employees he tried to bribe. Joseph turned to the last page. There it was, the signature, Harry Cooper. Seeing that name, I realized the man I had loved as my son was gone for good. I set my hands on the papers. My fingers trembled. Nausea climbed my throat. Everything I had been, the woman who built an empire, who inspired others, who employed hundreds, was reduced to one word: insane. Joseph watched me carefully. "Do you want me to tear this up?" he asked quietly. "I can destroy it right now." No, I didn't even lift my head. "I want to keep it, to never forget how low love can fall." He nodded silently. Outside, the city kept moving, cars, voices, footsteps, utterly indifferent. And I sat there, alone, already being judged by a court that hadn't even begun. While Joseph talked about deadlines, hearings, and expert evaluations, my mind drifted. The scratch of his pen blended with a sound from long ago, a child's laughter. I saw Harry as a little boy, running through the old shop, enchanted by the colored stones. "Look, Mom, this one shines brighter than the sun," he'd say. I laughed, exhausted but happy. "One day you'll take care of all this, my son." And with eyes full of pride, he answered, "I promise." The memory hit like lightning, because he had kept his promise. He took care of everything, just not the way I imagined. Joseph closed the folder and looked at me. "We have to respond." "Respond how?" "By contesting the petition," Joseph said. "We'll gather evidence, witnesses, everything. And if no one believes me, they will." "No, Joseph." I looked him straight in the eye. "The world always believes the son before it believes the mother." He didn't answer. He knew I was right. "We'll fight, Mrs. Cooper," he said finally. "And I'll stand by you until the end." "I'll fight too, Joseph, but not for revenge." "For what, then?" "For dignity." That same night, while I tried to rest, the phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Messages, calls, notifications. I opened one, and saw the headline: "Son of famous businesswoman files petition to declare mother legally incompetent." My name was everywhere. Amalia Cooper. Old photos, twisted headlines, cruel comments. Sad, but she already seemed out of touch. Classic case of power going to her head. Women who boss around too much always end up like this. He's probably just trying to protect the estate. I scrolled until I couldn't anymore. People judged me without knowing me, diagnosed me without hearing me. The love I gave had become a meme. The life I built had turned into a punchline. I went to the mirror. My reflection stared back, tired. Yes, but lucid. And I said to myself quietly, "The whole world is questioning my sanity, but none of them know what it means to go mad from love." My breath caught. My hands were sweating. My heart raced too fast. I sank to the floor, back against the wall, and let the tears come, not the restrained kind from before, but raw, heavy sobs, filled with anger and grief. For a moment, I wanted to disappear, to leave it all behind, the house, the company, the name, and vanish. But then I remembered who I was, where I came from, and the woman the world once knew before they called her insane. I stood up slowly, washed my face, and looked in the mirror again. My face was swollen, but there was something new in my eyes, the same expression I'd had when I decided to build everything from nothing. That fierce blend of fear and courage that had carried me all my life. I thought of every woman who had ever been called crazy for refusing to stay silent, for saying enough, for defying the very people who were supposed to protect her. And I realized this wasn't just my story anymore. It was ours. I took the sapphire necklace, the same one that had followed me through every battle, and fastened it around my neck. The weight of the stones grounded me. They want to prove I've lost my mind, I thought. But what I've lost is my fear. The next morning, the headlines were still there. My name was trending. My picture was plastered across every screen. And while the world called me crazy, I was preparing my counterattack. I opened the notebook where I'd been writing everything down, and wrote, in steady letters, "They took my sleep. Now, I'll take their lies." I closed the notebook and looked out the window, watching the sun rise slowly. The whole world was judging my sanity, but none of them knew what it means to go mad from love. And that was how my fight began, to prove that no one can steal the reason of a woman who still knows exactly who she is. In the days that followed, I stopped going to the office. The world outside was speaking for me, and I had to learn to listen to what silence was saying. It was then, standing before the mirror, that I discovered the one truth I still had left. Even broken, I still shone. The world kept spinning, only I had stopped. Days came and went, dragging themselves like long shadows across the walls of the house. No more meetings, no phone calls, no decisions, only the sound of wind against the windows and the clock marking hours I no longer counted. It had been weeks since I'd stepped foot in the company. The employees sent reports I never opened. Joseph kept insisting on visiting, but I always postponed. I told him I was tired and I was just not in the way he thought. I was tired of life, of the weight of my own name, and of the silence it now carried. The house felt like a mausoleum. The flowers in the vases had wilted. The curtains stayed drawn. The marble floors that once filled me with pride now reflected nothing but absence. As I walked the halls, my footsteps echoed hollow, as if I were a ghost inside what I had built. The walls held too many memories: dinners, laughter, parties, the sound of the piano Harry used to play as a child. I touched the middle key, and the sound rang out, dissonant, off-key. It sounded like a sigh, or a farewell. In the living room, on the table, were the jewelry boxes from the last collection, the final pieces I'd designed before everything fell apart. I opened one. The jewels glimmered faintly in the afternoon light, but their shine no longer moved me. It was a dead-shine beauty without a pulse. I picked up the sapphire necklace, the same one that had followed me since that Christmas, and stared at it for a long moment. Each stone reflected a fractured version of my face, distorted, broken. Then I lifted my gaze to the large mirror across the room. The image that looked back wasn't the woman I used to be. My hair disheveled, my eyes dull, my skin pale. But what frightened me most was the emptiness behind my eyes. It looked as though the woman inside me had left, leaving only the shell. I stepped closer, touched the glass with my fingertips. The chill of it made me shiver. And then, in a sudden impulse, something between rage and despair, hurled the necklace at the mirror. The crash was instant. The glass shattered, scattering reflections across the room. Each shard showed a fragment of Maya's mouth, wrinkles, pain, pieces of a woman who had once been whole. I fell to my knees, surrounded by splinters. The echo of the impact still rang, in the air, metallic, merciless. And there, on the floor, I finally understood what that mirror had been trying to tell me. You haven't lost your reflection, Amalia. You just don't recognize it anymore. I stayed there for hours or minutes. I'm not sure. Time had stopped meaning anything. All that existed was the sound of my own breathing. The necklace lay among the shards. The blue stones, once symbols of power, now looked like frozen tears. I picked one up and held it in my palm. Maybe it's time to stop, I thought. Stop fighting. Leave the company. The lawsuit, the noise. Just disappear. Maybe vanishing would be more dignified than continuing to be a spectacle. I imagined how easy it could be. Sell everything, disappear, change my name, become no one. But then the thought that always kept me alive came. If I disappear, they win. I closed my fist around the sapphire so tightly that its edge nearly broke my skin. The warmth of blood rose to the surface, reminding me there was still life inside. And where there is life, there is choice. Night fell slowly, and I remained there, seated on the floor, surrounded by broken glass. The shadows stretched along the walls, forming strange shapes. For a moment, I thought I heard voices, maybe memories. Harry, as a boy, calling Mom. His laughter in the garden. The first time he called me a useless old woman. Everything blended together, as if my mind were testing me, trying to see if I still had the strength to remain who I was. They say madness is losing touch with reality, I thought. But what is a mother's reality, if not the love she invents to survive the pain? I closed my eyes, and for the first time in many years, I didn't ask God for a miracle. I asked Him for a sign. I don't know how much time passed before I heard it. It was faint, almost a whisper. 3 soft knocks at the door. I stood slowly, dizzy, still disoriented, glanced at the clock, almost 9 at night. No one ever came to see me at that hour. I walked down the hallway, bare feet against the cold floor. The knocking came again this time, firmer. "Who is it?" I asked, without opening. "It's me, Mrs. Cooper." The voice was feminine, hesitant. "You probably don't remember me." "Who's speaking?" "It's Clara. I used to work for your company, a few years ago." The name sounded familiar but distant, like a memory sealed in a forgotten chest. "Clara. Yes, ma'am. You helped me once, when I was going through a rough time. I never forgot." I hesitated a few seconds before unlocking the door. When I opened it, the light from the hallway fell across her face, young, but worn with fatigue. Yet her eyes carried something I hadn't seen in a long time: sincerity. "What are you doing here at this hour?" I asked. "I had to talk to you," she said, breathless. "It's about what they're doing to you, about your son, and the case." My stomach turned. I stepped back, letting her in. She looked around, taking in the broken mirror, the shards scattered across the floor. "Sorry for the mess." "Don't be," she said softly. "I think you'll want to hear what I have to tell you." I sat on the couch, and she stood before me, holding a secret that seemed too big for her small frame. The clock struck 9:15 when she took a deep breath and began. "Mrs. Cooper, what they've done to you is much worse than it looks." I didn't move. My hands still trembled. But something inside me, something that had been nearly dead, came back to life. Because sometimes, what saves us isn't hope. It's the need to know the whole truth. Outside, the wind was rising, as if the world itself sensed that nothing would ever be the same after that night. Clara's words would change everything. That night, I realized that life had taken almost everything from me, except one thing: the power to begin again. Clara stood before me, hands clasped, eyes wide with urgency. Outside, the wind rattled the windows, each creak sounding like a warning. There was something in the way she breathed, a mixture of fear and courage, that told me, before she even spoke, that the night would not end the same way it began. I sat down slowly, still dazed, the shattered mirror glinting behind me. Her gaze moved from the fragments on the floor to my face, and then she said, "You don't really know me, Mrs. Cooper. But I know you. I worked at your company 8 years ago. I was just an office assistant back then. My husband was sick, and I didn't have the money to buy his medication. I remember you called me into your office. You didn't ask a single question, just handed me an envelope and said, 'Take care of him. We'll figure out the rest later.'" Clara swallowed hard. "I never forgot that. I only did what anyone should do," I replied, my voice faint. "No, ma'am," she said gently. "You did what no one else would." She drew a deep breath and went on. "Now, I'm a reporter. I work for an independent news site. That's why I came. I saw what they're saying about you, what they're doing to you. And I know it isn't true." My heart pounded. For a moment, fear and hope collided inside me. "How can you be so sure?" I asked. "Because I investigated." She pulled a folder from her bag filled with notes, photographs, printed emails, screenshots. "These are messages exchanged between your son, his wife, and her mother. I got them through a source who works in their lawyer's office. They planned everything: the fake medical report, the bribed witnesses, even the doctor who agreed to sign the papers." I felt my body tremble. She continued, "They wanted to remove you from the company completely, claiming cognitive decline and paranoid behavior. But the worst part comes after." "After," I whispered. "After the court approved the petition, they planned to have you transferred to a rest facility in another state. No one leaves those places. They called it a final solution." The air left my lungs. I closed my eyes, trying not to collapse. Clara stepped closer and laid her hand on mine. "I couldn't stay silent," she said softly. "Not after what you did for me." Her words felt like bomb and fire at the same time. Because amid all the pain, there it was again, something I thought had died long ago: loyalty without agenda. "What are you going to do with this?" I asked, staring at the folder. Clara straightened her back. "Tell the truth. You're going to publish it." "Yes, but I wanted you to know first. They'll come after you. I know they'll try to discredit you, ruin your name. I know that too." "Then why do it?" I asked. She looked me straight in the eyes and said, her voice steady and clear, "Because someone has to prove that truth still exists in this world, and that not every powerful woman is crazy. Some of us are just tired of being beaten down." The tears rose, but they weren't of pain. They were of recognition, of gratitude. As if, for a moment, life itself reminded me that good people still existed, rare, but real. Then do it, Clara. Are you sure? I am. Do you want to give an interview? No. Why not? Because the silence of a wounded woman speaks louder than 1,000 defenses. She nodded, eyes steady. Then my voice will be yours. 2 days later, the article went live. A simple, direct title, impossible to ignore. The Betrayal of Amalia Cooper, When Love Becomes a Weapon. It began with my story, the woman who built a jewelry empire, raised her son alone, and ended up betrayed by him. But the real impact came after. The messages, the evidence, the screenshots, the audio recordings, everything. Clara held nothing back. At the end of the piece, one line said what I never could: a mother's sanity isn't measured by forged reports, but by the courage to keep standing after being stabbed by the one she gave life to. The article went viral within hours. News outlets reposted it, videos multiplied, journalists, influencers, lawyers, everyone was talking. Hashtags filled the trending topics. Hashtag justice for Amalia. Hashtag she is not crazy. Hashtag mothers who won't be silenced. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Messages from strangers, women all over the country sending their support. Some shared their own stories, mothers, grandmothers, businesswomen, forgotten and silenced. Others simply wrote, "You represent me, stay strong. Love didn't drive you mad, it proved you." Joseph called, voice trembling. "Mrs. Cooper, have you seen what's happening?" "I have. The article is devastating. The entire country is on your side. I only wanted the truth, Joseph. And now it belongs to the world." The social networks, once full of insults, overflowed with solidarity. The company received flowers, letters, even public apologies. Some employees who had distanced themselves returned to offer their support. And amid it all, a strange feeling overtook me. The weight that had been crushing me for months finally began to lift. I walked to the mirror in the living room, the one I had shattered. The shards were still on the floor, but now they reflected something new. Morning light slipped through the curtains, illuminating the broken surfaces. And for the first time, I saw myself there, fragmented, yes, but alive. Each piece reflected a part of me: the mother, the businesswoman, the wounded woman, the survivor. I touched the glass gently. It didn't cut me. The cold surface reminded me of what was left. And I whispered, almost smiling, "They tried to bury me, but they forgot I'm made of diamond. And diamonds don't break, they're refined." That night, I sat on the veranda, the soft wind on my face, and took a deep breath for the first time in a long while. My phone kept vibrating with messages of support, but I left it aside. I looked at the sky and thought of everything I had lived through, the humiliation, the fear, the shame, and I realized that every pain had become a voice. What they tried to bury became a headline, and my shame became my voice. I smiled through tears, alone. Because sometimes, justice comes disguised as courage, and courage, when it meets truth, makes the whole world listen. But truth has a price, and the same light that set me free began to burn my son's name. The days following the article were a storm. Messages, phone calls, interview requests, everything happened too fast. But inside, I remained silent, because true victory isn't shouted, it's built. While the entire country talked about me, Joseph and Ryan worked quietly. They knew the final battle wasn't for headlines, it was for evidence. The first meeting took place on a rainy night. Joseph's desk was covered in papers, folders, drives, and scanned documents. I watched it all calmly, sipping tea like someone watching a film they've already seen, one whose ending still hurts. "Mrs. Cooper," Joseph began, "we found what was missing." "What is it?" Ryan opened a folder and laid it before me. Inside, certified copies, expert analyses, handwriting reports. "Forgery," he said. "The medical report submitted in the case is completely fake." "Are you sure?" "Absolutely. The doctor, whose name appears, never treated you. There's no record of you in the CRM system," Joseph added. "And more. The stamp used belongs to a clinic that closed 3 years ago." A chill ran through me. He went on, "We also traced emails between your daughter-in-law and her mother, exchanged with your son's lawyer. They discussed amounts and dates. There are even proof of payment receipts. They paid for the report. They did, and left a trail." Ryan's tone was sharper than I had ever heard it. "Mrs. Cooper, this isn't just a guardianship case anymore. It's a crime. We spent hours gathering everything, every document, every attachment, every line of conversation. The final dossier looked like a mirror of what they'd done to me. Cold, meticulous, merciless, Joseph organized the files with surgical precision. Ryan cross-checked dates and signatures, and I watched in silence, because my anger no longer screamed, it strategized. "Tomorrow we'll file the contestation," Joseph said, "and request immediate dismissal of the case, plus a criminal investigation." "They won't wait quietly," I replied. "Harry can't stand losing control, then we'll let him lose his disguise." The courtroom was packed. Cameras, journalists, onlookers. I walked through the flashes with my head high and my heart pounding, not from fear, but from memory. I remembered every humiliation, the dinner, the restaurant, the shouting, the shattered mirror, and I thought, today, every wound will speak for me. Harry was already there, beside his wife and her mother. When he saw me enter, he looked away. The woman who once cradled him was now the woman facing him before a judge. His lawyer tried to smile, but his expression faltered. Across the room, Joseph and Ryan opened their folders, and when the judge asked for opening statements, the world seemed to hold its breath. Joseph stood up. With a firm voice, he began, "Your Honor, the defense presents indisputable evidence that the psychiatric report on which this case is based is falsified." The judge frowned. Joseph handed over the documents, one by one. He explained the irregularities, showed the stamp and signature records, displayed the bank statements of payments made by the daughter-in-law. The cameras, discreetly permitted, captured everything. The silence was absolute. Even the air felt heavy. Harry's lawyer tried to interrupt. "Your Honor, this is an orchestrated farce." But the judge cut him off. "Did you personally verify the original documents, counsel?" "I received them from my clients." "Well, it seems your clients have deceived you as well." The blow was sharp. Expressions shifted. The daughter-in-law, pale, whispered something to her mother. Harry lowered his head. Joseph continued, relentless. "Furthermore, Your Honor, there are records proving that the plaintiff attempted to sell confidential company information belonging to the defendant to competitors. We have evidence of attempted commercial fraud and breach of trust." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Some reporters began typing frantically. The judge raised his hand. "Order in the court." He turned to Harry. "Do you confirm these accusations?" Harry hesitated. He swallowed hard, but faced with the mountain of evidence, he only shook his head. "Then this case is dismissed," said the judge. "It will be forwarded to the public prosecutor's office for criminal investigation." The sentence fell like a gavel strike. Final, liberating. As I left, the flashes returned, but this time, the journalists weren't asking about madness. They wanted to talk about justice. Harry left soon after, surrounded, stunned, his face hollow. The cameras followed him like predators. Microphones shouted, "Harry, is it true the report was forged? Will your mother press charges? What do you have to say about journalist Clara Alvis's investigation?" He didn't answer. He just walked quickly, eyes down, while his wife and mother-in-law, terrified, tried to cover their faces. Hours later, the headlines filled every screen. "Court clears, Amalia Cooper, psychiatric report proven falsified, son and daughter-in-law investigated for attempted fraud and breach of trust, from victim to symbol of resilience, the turning point of Amalia Cooper." I went home exhausted, but light. The veranda was bathed in the soft glow of dusk. I sat down, closed my eyes, and let the breeze touch my face. It wasn't euphoria, it was peace. The peace of someone who walked through fire and still kept her shape. Joseph called. "It's over, Mrs. Cooper." "No, Joseph," I replied, smiling. "Now it begins." "What begins?" "A life without fear." I went to the mirror, the same one Clara had once seen shattered. The shards were still there, but now they glimmered under the evening light. I knelt, picked up one, and placed it on the table beside the sapphire necklace. Two broken things, yet both still reflected light. I looked at the reflection and whispered, "He tried to steal my empire, and ended up losing the name he inherited." And for the first time, I smiled without guilt. After the trial, he disappeared. For weeks, there was no word. Until an unexpected phone call brought the final chapter of this story, and with it, the chance for forgiveness I never thought I'd grant. Time, at last, began to slow down. The days had color again, but in a different way. Softer, quieter, more mature. The house, once full of echoes, now breathed stillness. The wind slipped gently through the open windows, and the rustle of leaves in the garden felt like a kind of forgiveness the world was offering me. It had been weeks since the trial. The press had moved on, the news outlets already chasing another scandal to fill their headlines, and I, for the first time in a long while, wasn't a story anymore. I was just a person. And being just a person, after everything, felt like a privilege. They say victory is sweet, but no one talks about the bitterness that comes after. I had won. But victory comes at a cost, the silence that lingers when the noise fades. Justice had been served, my name cleared, my story restored, my empire intact. But inside me, there were ruins no judge could rebuild. Sometimes I woke in the middle of the night, still hearing the echo of his voice, useless old woman, crazy, ungrateful, words that cling to the skin like scars. Other nights, I remembered his laughter as a child, his small arms around my neck, the pride in his eyes when he said, "My mother is the strongest woman in the world." And then, what hurt wasn't his hatred, it was the longing for who he'd been before he lost himself. Victory is an empty field after battle. You look around and realize the silence weighs more than defeat. I started visiting the workshop behind the house again. There, among molds, sketches, and tools, life began to make sense once more. I started creating a new collection, not of jewels, but of memories. Each piece was inspired by a feeling: forgiveness, solitude, rebirth. Working with my hands reminded me that I could still turn pain into beauty, that even the coldest metal can take shape if it's heated enough. As I polished a sapphire, I thought, maybe the soul is like that too. It has to go through fire to learn how to shine without depending on anyone. I smiled to myself. The sound of the file scraping the metal was almost meditative, a song of reconstruction. It was during one of those afternoons that my phone buzzed. By reflex, I looked at the screen and saw the name, Harry. My heart stopped for a second. Then a heavy silence filled the room. I picked up the phone with trembling hands. The message was short, almost humble. "Mom, I know I don't deserve it, but I want you to know I'm sorry. I'm trying to be someone better. I hope one day you can forgive me." I stared at those words for a long time. They were simple, but they carried a weight only a mother understands, the weight of a son who, even after everything, still asks for her arms. A lump rose in my throat. My first impulse was to ignore it, but the silence, that same silence that had haunted me for months, now asked for an answer. I picked up the phone and typed slowly. Each word felt like a thread, stitching an old wound. "Harry, what destroys an empire isn't age, it's ingratitude." And I sent it. Nothing more. No punctuation. Because some stories don't end, they simply stop. The days that followed were calm. No reply. No call. No sign. Sometimes I wondered if he read it, if he cried, if he understood. But soon I realized none of that mattered anymore. Because forgiveness, I discovered, doesn't need an answer. It's a gesture made inward, a key turning in the heart to make room for peace. I went back to tending the garden. The roses that had dried out began to bloom again. The air smelled of new rain, and the sunlight felt gentler. It was as if the world was telling me, quietly, that everything was all right. One afternoon, I sat on the porch and heard the distant sound of the church bell. I closed my eyes and gave thanks, not for having one, but for still being here. Pain taught me what the years never did, that love and clarity can coexist, that a woman can shatter 1,000 times and still remain whole, and that silence, when it isn't escape, is healing. I didn't know where Harry was. Some said he'd left town, others that he'd sold everything and vanished. But deep down, I knew. There are pains we must face alone, until remorse matures into peace. I walked to the mirror, now restored. The glassmaker had rebuilt it with the same frame, but left a thin line across the center, a scar of glass. I looked at my reflection and thought, the beauty of jewels lies in the imperfections that survive time, and so does mine. The wind drifted through the windows, making the curtains dance slowly. On the piano, a single key played softly, as if someone invisible was saying goodbye. I smiled, closed my eyes, and whispered, "Love wounded me, but it was the wound that taught me how to live." The sun set slowly, bathing the floor in gold, and as night arrived, the silence, the same one that once terrified me, had become peace. The sun was gone, the mother remained, and time, at last, returned to each what they deserved. What destroys an empire isn't age, it's ingratitude. But what rebuilds it is the courage to keep loving, even after love has gone. Time passed slowly, but it passed. The seasons changed, the garden bloomed again, and even the creak of the front gate stopped hurting. The company carried on steadily under Ryan's direction. Clara, now a respected journalist, had become a constant presence, and I, for the first time in many years, lived without needing to prove anything to anyone. The scandal had become a memory. The wounds, scars, and the silence. Finally, peace. It was on an ordinary Tuesday morning that the phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. I answered without haste, assuming it was something from the company. "Hello, Amalia. It's Cecilia, your cousin." I smiled, recognizing her voice. It had been years since we'd spoken. After storms, even the oldest ties drift apart a little, as if needing space to breathe. "Cecilia, what a good surprise. How are you?" "I'm fine. But I'm calling for another reason." "Did something happen?" "Yes, it's about Harry." His name still had the power to still the air for a moment. I waited. She continued, her voice calm. "He's here, in town, working at Uncle's carpentry shop." "A carpentry shop?" "Yes, he seems to be living simply, helping out, learning the trade. They say he's changed a lot, that he doesn't talk about the past, that he's trying to rebuild himself." I stayed silent, looked out at the garden, the same one where, years ago, he'd ridden his bicycle. For a moment, memory and reality overlapped, and my heart beat slowly between pride and sorrow. "Are you okay?" she asked. "I am, Cecilia," I replied. "And he will be too." That night, as I was getting ready for bed, the computer chimed. A new message. Sender, Harry Cooper. Subject, "Thank you." I opened it with trembling hands. The words were few, but they weighed more than any inheritance could. "Mom, I don't expect you to forgive me. I just want you to know that I understand now. I lost everything money could buy, and that's how I discovered the value of what it never could. Today, I work with wood. I'm learning to shape what I once only knew how to break. Every piece I make reminds me of the jewels I saw you create, only now, with humility. Thank you for not giving up on me, Harry." The tears came softly, almost silently. There was no pain, no anger, just a kind of seasoned tenderness, the kind that no longer idealizes anyone. I closed the email but kept looking at the glowing screen. Its light reflected on the window glass. The moon outside seemed to smile, pale, but present. I sat in the armchair, held the sapphire necklace, and felt the chill of the metal against my skin. I thought of all that gold had lived through, the brilliance, the scandal, the silence, and I realized that, deep down, I was like it too, shaped by fire, yet still whole. I opened the notebook where I'd been writing reflections since the fall began. On the last page, I wrote slowly, "Perhaps the purest gold is the one that survived the fire." I closed the notebook, turned off the lights, and for the first time in a very long time, I slept without fear of dreaming. And that's how I finished telling my story. Tell me in the comments, what would your reaction have been? I want to thank this channel Buried by Family for allowing me to share this part of my life with you. This channel needs your support to keep bringing more stories like this one. So click the subscribe button, that way other women will also be able to share their truths here. On the screen, there's another video you might like, and the icon to subscribe to the channel.